Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Live Your Yes Life. This is a podcast where we share interviews, ideas, channel thoughts to support you from going from just wishing and wanting to actually living the life of your dreams. I'm Kaela Jetta. I'm one of the co-hosts and I am excited to be with you today for this solo episode where I give you the behind the scenes of how I met an unreasonable goal. Because I've got to tell you, friends, that I recently crossed the finish line of something that felt incredibly unreasonable when I made this commitment to myself at the beginning of the year. So I'm going to give you all the behind the scenes details of how I actually had this happen when it felt so unreasonable. If you've been listening to our podcast for a while, you probably have heard me speak about this a little bit, but just from the training perspective. And now I have officially completed it. And so I'm excited to share this episode with you in its completion. So here's what happened. At the beginning of the year, it was the end of January, I started getting the idea to run a half marathon. And when that idea came to me, I did not like it. I was in big time resistance. I was upset. What was really, I guess it's less that I was getting an idea and more that the idea of it was coming into my space. 3 times in a 1 week period, I was hearing different people telling me that they were running a half marathon or the idea of a half marathon was just coming into my orbit. And the first time I was like, that's interesting. And the second time I was like, And the third time that I heard this in a 1 week time span, I thought, why am I being shown this? What is here for me? And so I checked in and said, is this for me? Am I supposed to run a half marathon? And I noticed so much resistance come up in myself, so much resistance saying, you're not a runner, you haven't run in 9 years, this would be too hard, you have other things you want to commit to this year, this isn't for you. I just noticed like a bunch of resistance. And so I sat with that and I got curious. And I was curious about this resistance sounds pretty negative, pretty limiting. And so it's not that I necessarily wanted to prove myself wrong, but as I explored that, what I realized was just that the resistance was first to the party. And that for me, the reason that the resistance to running a half marathon was so loud was actually because there was another part of me that really wanted to take that on. Not because I necessarily wanted to run a half marathon, but there was a part of me that was craving an opportunity for reinvention, a chance for expansion and a deepening within inside myself. And this was just being presented as the opportunity for how that could carry out. And so that whole process happened pretty quick, within like a 12-hour time period. So I texted a friend and said, I'm thinking about running a half marathon. Will you do it with me? She said yes. It ended up not being eventually in alignment for her, which was all good. But it was really helpful when she said yes, that gave me that little extra ounce of courage to say, okay, I can do this. So I found the half marathon in my town that I wanted to do in October. It's right now the end of January. And I said, this is it. I'm committing. Here I go. And so the topic today is how I met an unreasonable goal. I'm going to give you all the steps. And I want to say that it started with actually deciding that I would. What I did not do was say, well, let me think about it. Let me see. Let me give it a shot. I don't believe that that kind of energy is going to carry us to an unreasonable goal. If we're in a space of let me see if this will work for me, if I can take this on, if this is going to happen for me, it's not likely that we're going to be able to allow ourselves to get all the way to the finish line because we're going to get in our way. We're going to sabotage. Oh my gosh, y'all, my dogs are barking so loud and I am recording this live. So I have to roll with it. So you're welcome for the extra dog barking, I guess, in this episode. The first step of how I met it is I decided, capital D decide. I have another podcast episode around capital D decide and what that really means to firmly plant your feet in that decision. And the process that I used is a real simple 2-step process, which is called declare and fulfill. And what we do in declare and fulfill is we start with step 1. It's the decision. It's the declaration of I am committing. So a declaration is not a hope. It's not a wish. It's not a let me see. It's not I'm going to give it a go. It's a commitment, a promise to myself that I will move all the way through with any circumstances that arise. Okay, so a declaration is not if all goes in my favor, if the weather is perfect, if the circumstances are great, if the conditions are ideal, and everything works in my favor, then I will. That's not a declaration. A declaration is I'm drawing a line in the sand saying that I am making this commitment and I don't know how. And I do know that there likely will be some circumstances. And here I go, anyways, even though I don't know how. And so that's the first place I started. I said, I declare that on October 5th, 2024, I will run a half marathon. I made that commitment to myself. It didn't matter to anybody else, but I made that commitment to myself. So that's step one. And we make the declaration one time. Once we make the declaration, we don't have to keep redeclaring it. We don't have to renegotiate it. It's a commitment that we now are going to honor. Okay. And so just check in if there's something that you feel like you have to continue to redeclare or redecide. You didn't actually declare it. You're just like thinking about it, feeling into it. And that's so good. That happens sometimes before we're ready. But once we actually make the declaration, we're all in, we're committed. There's an analogy or a story that talks about burning the ships. So it's like if you've arrived on the island, you burn the ships to say that, okay, there's no going back, here I am. And so that's what it takes to start. How we meet an unreasonable goal, we make a declaration, a commitment to ourselves that even with all of the circumstances, here we go. And then step two is fulfill. This is declare and fulfill. And so what fulfilling means is being the person who would take the inspired action. Okay, fulfilling is being the person who would take the inspired action. And not just the one action, the one time, but the actions required the whole time, all the way for however long the process is. And how do we know how long the process is? Until we meet our declaration. Now, I think that every good declaration has a by when date. So you'll notice that my declaration was, I declare I will run a half marathon by October 5th, 2024, because that was the date of the half marathon that I was signing up for. If for whatever reason, something had occurred and I could not fulfill my declaration by October 5th, I would not have lost, I would not have failed. I would simply stay in the declaration until it had been fulfilled. Okay, so we don't just play just until that date, we play until our commitment is honored. And I think that that's something that takes a lot of people out. Like we set a goal with a certain timeline, and then the universe has other plans. It goes different. The timing is different than what our human would like it to be. And we think like, well, gosh, I failed, or I didn't meet the mark on time. And so then we quit. But that's not how declare and fulfill works. The way that declare and fulfill actually works is we play all the way until we have fulfilled on our commitment in its entirety. And we do that by being the person who would take the inspired action. And this is why I wanted to make this declaration for myself, is because it was an opportunity, like I said at the beginning, for some self-reinvention. And what reinvention really is, reinvention is never about becoming someone that you're not. Reinvention is always a deepening into a new layer of someone that you already are, but maybe haven't been playing in the depths of. And that was what was here for me. And what I knew was here for me was getting to look at, okay, where have I been unwilling or had not known to go inside myself, that now I can cultivate that way of beingness inside of me to get more willing, to get more unreasonable, to take some different kind of actions than I normally would take. And that unleashes a new experience of who I am. And that's really powerful. So there's three main questions that I'm going to give you. Feel free to write these down because I think that these are really helpful. These are three questions that you can ask yourself while you're in this process of fulfilling. And the first question is, who do I need to be? Or who is there for me to be? And so I saw that while I was meeting this unreasonable goal of running a half marathon as someone who did not identify as a runner, who I needed to be is a runner. I need to be a long distance runner. I need to be an athlete. I need to be committed. I need to be willing. This is the person that there is for me to be. It's an opportunity for me to upgrade and uplevel my identity to see myself in a different way than I have seen myself in the past. Okay, so that's question one. Who do I need to be? Y'all, my dogs are just barking so much today. And of course, like they're quiet all day unless I'm recording something. That's just the way that it goes. So thanks for hanging with me. Question one, who do I need to be? Question two, how do I need to show up for myself? So now we're in the process of fulfilling on our declaration. We've identified here's who I get to be, here's the identity that I get to sink into. And being that version of me, how do I need to show up for myself? Okay. And this is where I got to experience some things that I didn't expect. What I thought was going to happen of how I need to show up for myself was like holding things really tight, like really being on it, kind of like pushing. Like I thought I was going to have to get into more masculine energy. I found the experience to be the exact opposite. How I needed to show up for myself was with softness, was with slowness, was with slowing down. How I needed to show up for myself was compassion, was care, was generosity, delight, play. This is what allowed me to stay in the game. So, and how I showed up for myself, being willing to be surprised by what is required in this situation. And I really found that by softening, by letting there be a curve and an edge and space, I was able to honor my commitment. And so I would offer to you, are you holding anything too tight? Have you thought it might be one way and maybe it's starting to go a different way and you're just gripping so tight to like, nope, I thought it was going to be this way. And so you're not letting it go in the way that it's meant to go. And then the third question is what is needed to keep moving forward? What is needed to keep moving forward? Something that I share with my clients a lot of the time is sometimes they'll say to me, like, I just feel like I'm going backwards or I feel like I'm at a standstill. And so the analogy that I'll use with them is I'll say, imagine that you are hiking up a mountain. Okay, so here we go. Our goal is to get from base camp down at the bottom up to the top. We're hiking a mountain. There are going to be times along the path when we take a step down. And we could say to ourselves, like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to go up. What am I doing taking a step down? But it's just that that's how the path goes sometimes. Sometimes the path curves around. Sometimes it veers left. Sometimes it hangs right. Sometimes we take a few steps down while we're still increasing in elevation. And so to answer the question of what is needed to move forward, it might be that we need to loosen up a little, that we need to allow for some space for the path to go however it's going, which might be different than how we thought it was going to go. I experienced circumstances along the journey of meeting this unreasonable goal of running this half marathon. The first circumstance was that in April, I pulled a hamstring. And I did not pull it while running. I pulled it while walking my lovely dogs. So, which you can often hear barking in my podcast recordings. So I was walking them. I only had 2 dogs at the time. Now I have 3. I know the chaos it grows in size. And they both wanted to pull different directions. And as that happened, my hamstring pulled. And so here I am in April. I'm still months out, still 6 months out from this unrealistic goal, but already throwing a wrench in my plans and honestly, a little bit of a wrench in my belief in myself. And so I got to ask, what is needed to keep moving forward? Rehab, recovery, like a rehabbing of my muscles, continued commitment to what's possible for me, to the identity that I see myself as. I'm a long distance runner. I'm an athlete. Well, sometimes athletes have to take care of their pulled muscles. This is what happens. It's part of the gig of being an athlete. And so what was needed to move forward was to see myself in that light and then to respond appropriately. And so then I got to heal that, hooray. And towards the end of June, I found myself having this hip circumstance. It's not an injury. It's just that my hip was like having a moment, which carried on through my half marathon. And so what is needed to keep moving forward was continuing to take exceptional care of my body, my mind, and my soul, to soften and take better care of my body than I ever have before. What was needed to keep moving forward was to slow down. Okay. And that was what was true for me. Whatever comes up might be different for you, but that was my experience. It's how it was going for me. But these are the 3 questions that I continued to play with as I was on this many month journey of fulfilling. Who do I need to be? How do I get to show up for myself? What is needed for me to keep moving forward? And I find that so often we sabotage ourselves meeting an unreasonable goal because we relate to ourselves as an old, disempowered version of us, instead of the now and future version who already knows what it feels like to meet whatever the goal we want to have is. And so when we're relating to ourselves in a disempowered way or too harsh, or we are being our own biggest critic, we're being harsh to ourselves, we get in our own way. We sabotage ourselves. When we take ourselves out because things aren't going according to plan or going how we think the timing should go, we get in our own way. I want to just like pivot the conversation a little bit and speak into for a moment if you have an unreasonable goal around money, because something that I hear so often is people will set some kind of money goal for themselves, which seems totally unreasonable. And then they take themselves out of the opportunities and the possibilities that can actually move them forward because of incredible disbelief. And even though my unreasonable goal was unrelated to money, I want to speak into the incredible disbelief. What is required for us to meet an unreasonable goal is incredible belief. And so anytime we start justifying why we can't, when we start defending our limitations, we're getting in the way of meeting the unreasonable goal. What really is here for us is to ask ourselves, how could this be a yes? What is needed to keep moving forward? How can I keep going? And so I just want to specifically speak into, if you have an unreasonable goal around money, I want to invite you to look at if what you're doing is defending your limitations, if you're justifying, here's why I can't, instead of exploring, how can it be? What can happen? How can I open myself up to the possibilities that are here? Okay. And that applies for any goal, but especially with money. There's like something special about money for whatever reason, where we just pretend like money really holds so much more power over us than it does. And we let money be our boss. And so I just wanted to speak into that extra, that whatever your unreasonable goal is right now, consider that once you've made the declaration, you get to show up as the version of you who then gets to show up for themselves to keep moving forward. And there is always a way. Anything is possible. So this was my amazing journey. I feel so proud of myself for fulfilling on this goal that did in fact seem incredibly unreasonable at the start, and now is like, of course I did this because I'm a long distance runner. I'm an athlete. I am a woman who declares and fulfills on her goals because I know who I am. I know that I'm worthy of having enriching experiences, of expanding and deepening into who I really am. And it's the wish that I have for you too. If this is supporting you, I invite you to continue listening into other podcast episodes. We have a podcast, a Facebook group, and a book all by the same name. It's all called Live Your Yes Life. So you can snag our book on Amazon. You can find our Facebook group on Facebook. And you're already listening to the podcast either on Apple, Spotify, on YouTube, on our website. So thank you so much for tuning in with me today. I am honored and grateful to get to share about this experience with you of how I met a recent unreasonable goal. It was really amazing, and I'll see you in our next episode.